If you're ready to get weird, let's talk about A24's new horror film, Men. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watcher Pass. If you're ready to get weird, let's get weird, because let's talk about Alex Garland's new horror film, Men, which is coming to theaters on May 20th, 2022. It is a strange horror film that has some amazing imagery and some beautiful cinematography. My hot take is I actually think you should rent it. Look, it is a beautiful piece of cinema. The cinematography is amazing. The setting is beautiful. The lighting is so good. And the sense of dread and unease is just so rich and layered throughout. But the story itself is strange, and the conclusion it didn't do it for me. It didn't leave me with a very great feeling. It just went a little too off the rails at the end, and I really didn't love how it ended. But I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and talk about the ending. So hey, look, if I missed things, if there's imagery that I didn't get, or if there's some meaning that should be attributed to some of this stuff, please let me know. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to understand more about this film. It's definitely a film that's going to elicit some strong reactions, some thoughts, and some different interpretations. So in Men, you have Harper, who's played by Jessie Buckley, who is retreating to this beautiful manor in the English countryside. It is a 500-year-old house. It is gorgeous. It has everything you would want if you're just trying to get away from life in the big city. And so she goes out here to just kind of relax and recover after some sort of trauma that she's had. There's something that happened between her and her husband that you don't really know why at the start, but she's trying to recover and heal here. And what turns out to be kind of this idyllic setting, this beautiful setting, starts to become sinister as more and more strange happenings happen around her. It starts with a very shocking event, and then has some more subtle, aggressive events occur that are related to that. And so as these build, her nightmare builds and her sense of unease grows in what should be just this beautiful, wonderful, safe environment. And so that is kind of the gist of the story. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the story in the ending portion. Look, there won't be major spoilers until the ending. There might be a few little things here and there, but I'm going to try to keep all the main spoilers to the ending portion. So if you don't want to know what happens in the film, you can watch it up until the ending section and turn it off then. So things I liked about this movie. The first, like I mentioned, the cinematography. This is a beautiful film. It has just some amazing shots, some amazing camera angles that really highlight just how beautiful and idyllic this area is. Like the setting is just gorgeous, and I loved seeing the nature shots. There's some close-up shots of nature. There's definitely a reverence for this environment. But the just amazing thing about the cinematography is that it can take one shot of something that looks beautiful, and then later on, or maybe in the next scene, it'll have a different angle that tweaks that shot and turns what was beautiful into maybe something that's sinister, maybe something that has some dread. So you'll have her approaching this tunnel that it's so interesting. It looks like it could be kind of dreamlike. She's enjoying, yelling into it and having some echoes. But then the camera pulls in and the tunnel becomes a lot more dark. Now you have something that is a lot more dreadful, a lot more unsettling, and it does it with all sorts of different aspects of the film. And part of what helps that is the second thing I love about this movie, the lighting. The use of light is just amazing. It does a lot in this film. Like in some aspects where you have something that's very unsettling, you will have this gorgeous light that kind of throws you off. Like you think this is going to be a beautiful scene, and then all of a sudden something terrible happens. Or you will have this horrible tragedy that just has this beautiful bathing natural light that gives it a very interesting kind of layered sense to it. But the film also uses the light to impose dread. Like I mentioned, the cinematography is really great, where you'll have something that's beautiful and then something unsettling in the same environment, just with different camera angles. And part of that is the light. Sometimes the lighting will be idyllic and dreamlike, and like a beautiful English morning, and you have this sense of wonder and love. Later on, when they show this scene again, the lighting will be much darker. It won't have as bright of a feel, and now you have a scene that used to be beautiful and now is much darker, much more foreboding. The third thing I love is the imagery. There is some great imagery throughout the film, and some of that is biblical. There's a really great scene at the start where she has she eats an apple from a tree, and it's like an Adam and Eve, like partaking of the forbidden fruit type of scene. They have just some really wonderful kind of statues and art in this film that coupled with the lighting and the shot selection, do give you a sense of dread and do give you a sense of like something foreboding is going to happen. All that together just leads to a film that is just visually so impressive. It's so beautiful to see. It's so like visually stunning. And the last thing I really loved is the subtlety of the film. Like the film is all about kind of reading between the lines and seeing threats and kind of uneasy situations in somewhat innocuous interactions. And sometimes there are very kind of overtly bad interactions, but oftentimes a lot of what happens to her is you will have someone who like makes a comment and it could be seen as innocuous or it could be seen as like probing for information, or another scene where someone that she should be able to trust has an off-putting response to what should be a fairly straightforward situation, and some off-putting actions that viewed in different lights would be threatening versus maybe comforting. And the film just does such a great job with that. It doesn't reveal too much. It doesn't kind of have many overt threats. There are definitely overt threats in the film, but a lot of the movie is about this subtle buildup and these subtle interactions that could have a dual meaning. The crux of this all is you have these small, almost innocuous infractions that build and build and build into this like eventually great larger action that happens. So this film, like I said, does a lot right. It was just a really great, beautiful film to watch. Things I didn't love about this film. The first is, look, it's really strange. It's a strange film. There is not in the main story, the main story of her going to the English countryside to heal and kind of recover from something that happened between her and her husband. That was not that strange. But what happens at this countryside becomes very odd. Like there are some, there's a person that's pursuing her that is just very out there, and I'll talk more about that in the ending. There are some characters that are very odd and like kind of very unsettling. All these like strange, weird interactions that lead to this very, very odd ending. And so that leads me to the second thing I didn't love is the ending. Like the ending itself, I don't know, it didn't really give me a great conclusion. Maybe I just didn't get what I should have from this film. And I'm going to talk a little more about the ending. I'll give my thoughts. So, you know, you can let me know what I get wrong. But overall, I think the ending didn't give me kind of the sense of closure and the sense of kind of overall fulfillment that I was expecting. And maybe that's not the point of the film. Maybe the film is just there to kind of raise questions and showcase some of these strange interactions. But overall, I didn't love the film as much as I was expecting to. I really thought I would like this film. I thought it was going to be great, especially from the start when you get these just this beautiful imagery and this kind of mysterious reason why she's here. I thought I was going to love this film. But the last, I don't know, about a third of the film, it just kind of didn't do it for me. That's not to say the film isn't a beautiful film, a very well-made film. It's just the overall conclusion just didn't really stick for me. So going into the ending, look, there will be spoilers. I'm going to talk about the ending. If you don't want to know what happens in the film, turn this off now. So one thing we do find out is the reason that Harper left to go to the countryside is her husband either killed himself or had a horrible accident after a very terrible fight. Like they were getting in an argument. She wanted to divorce him. They don't really ever say why. I think the reason is that because she has feelings for other people, possibly her friend Riley, and so she essentially says like she can't live like this. And he gets very defensive. He says, you know, you can't do this to me. Why would you do this to me? Like if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself, which is a horrible thing for someone to say, because look, she wants to live her life. She wants to be happy. She's not happy in the situation. And he's trying to essentially force her to stay in the situation. And if she leaves, he'll kill herself. He's like, look, like, do you want that on you? And she eventually is like, look, like that's not on me. Like that's on you. If you do that, like that's on you. I'm done. She goes downstairs. He confronts her again. And in this confrontation, he actually punches her. And so this like causes her to, you know, snap as it would. And she just pushes him out, like tells him to leave, like tell him to go away, never come back. He's never gonna see her again. Closes the door, locks it. He's outside of their apartment. And what we find out is that he eventually gets to the floor above, pushes his way into the apartment above, and gets on the balcony of the apartment above and is either trying to climb down into their apartment, or you know, is trying to jump and wants to like be in full view of the apartment. You don't really know why, but he falls from this balcony. When he falls from this balcony, he is looking into, their old apartment, and she is looking out the window, and their eyes meet. And so for a moment, they both kind of see each other as she is looking out and he is falling to his death. And then he falls and hits the ground. He's dead. It's a pretty brutal death. He his hand gets impaled in like a spike on the fence, and his legs are kind of twisted and broken, and he's clearly dead. But that is the trauma that then causes Harper to leave and go to the English countryside just to forget everything. And the film does a really great job of kind of sprinkling pieces of this story in her interactions, so you don't really get a full picture of what happened until towards the end. But while she's at this house, she goes for a lot of nature walks, and on one of her nature walks, she gets a sense that something is pursuing her. She gets to this tunnel, this dark tunnel, and this was a scene where it was it's beautiful and idyllic on one side, because she starts to say things in the tunnel, and there's this really interesting echo that happens, and she starts to kind of layer things she's saying into this almost folk kind of song. She'll go haha, and it'll go ha ha, and then she'll say something else, and it'll kind of layer in, so ha ha ha, things like that. But eventually, as she's going into this tunnel, it becomes a little bit more sinister, and as she's looking out, she sees someone kind of rise up from the darkness and start coming towards her. And so it's a very long tunnel, so she has time, but she starts to leave, and then that entity starts running towards her, and so she starts running as well, obviously scared, and just kind of runs and misses the way to get back to her cottage, and eventually has to climb up. She eventually reaches a dead end. She's worried what's going to happen. She climbs up out of this place and finds this kind of abandoned house area. And so she's walking out. She finally gets to a field. It's bright and sunny. She seems to be pretty happy. She turns around and takes a picture of this abandoned building that she had just walked out of. And then she sees this naked man, just fully naked man, very, very off-putting. He doesn't run after her, but he's just standing there. So she kind of turns around and walks very quickly back to her house. The next day, she is in her house, and the naked man shows up again outside, and she doesn't notice him at first, and then eventually she sees him, and she calls the cops, as you would if the naked man was outside your house. Cops come, they arrest him, they take him away. Everything seems to be okay. She explores the area more now that she's kind of confident that she's no longer being stalked by this person, and goes to a church where she has a very, very odd interaction with the pastor. And the film does a really good job with this as well, because I think almost every person is played by the same main actor in various different wigs and various different makeup pieces. It is a really interesting way to show this, because it makes every person who she has a negative interaction with look the same. And so, but it's very subtle. I couldn't tell at first. I think they are all played by Rory Kinnear. And he does a really good job of having very different personalities. But it is interesting to see all these different pursuers all have the same kind of general face and general features. Again, so at the church, she is walking around the church, and she sees this other person in this creepy mask. It's this childlike person who has on this female mask. Almost like a purge person, like someone in the purge. It is a clear Halloween type mask, and he asks if she wants to play hide and seek, and she's like, no, I don't want to play. He's like, why? You don't like games? And so she has this very uncomfortable interaction where eventually he just insults her as he's leaving, and she kind of brushes it off because she's like, look, I'm from the city, I'm used to people insulting me. But it is a very aggressive, strange interaction. And then she sees the priest who was there, who told the kid to get out of there, leave. And so she then confides in the priest what happened between her and her husband. And the priest is at first comforting, but he does these things, like I said, that are very subtle, but could be overt. When he's talking to her, he puts his hand on her leg, which is an aggressive thing for anyone to do. You could think, okay, maybe he's just trying to comfort her and this is how he knows how. But it does also have the very sinister thing of this is a person reaching out and inappropriately touching this person that is trying to confide in him. So after she kind of like talks to him about her situation, her husband killing himself, he then turns the blame on to her. He's like, well, did you give him a chance to apologize? She's like, what? Like, no, no. And she's like, well, I mean, do you think maybe if you had given him a chance to apologize, maybe he'd still be here? Maybe you would have been able to work this out? Like, look, men hit men, hit women. It's not nice, it's not pretty, but it happens, and it's not a capital offense. And she's just horrified, as she should be, right? Like, he is turning this horrible situation around on her. And so she just kind of like walks away. So now after these multiple bad interactions, she goes to the bar. She's like, I need a drink. Like, so she heads to the bar, and there she sees the caretaker of the house that she was in, Jeffrey, who he seems quirky. He seems odd. He had some weird interactions before, like some statements that, again, could be seen as kind of aggressive and inappropriate, or could be seen as just like this person who's quirky. And here, he tries to comfort her, but in the Jeffrey way, like not in a great way. He doesn't really seem to understand like the implication of some of the things he says. And here we also see a police officer who had arrested the naked man earlier. He comes in as well, and after he's there, she finds out that the naked man was just released. It's like, why would you release him? And it's like, well, we couldn't hold him for anything. Like, he didn't steal anything other than apples, and he just kind of showed up outside your house. He didn't seem to be dangerous, so we released him. And she is obviously upset by this. And Jeffrey, again, like, the writing and the interaction here is just wonderful, because terrible but wonderful, because like Jeffrey responds, when he's like, he stole apples, and he's like, oh, the Philistine, like things that make light of this really bad situation, which again, I love the subtlety of this. So after she finds out that this naked man is released, she leaves and heads home. And when she gets back, like, and as she's heading home, you see the naked man like appear, like kind of step out from the shadows and follow her. She doesn't notice him, but he is following her. So now she's back at her house. It's late. She's upset. She calls her friend Riley, who she's talked to a couple times. And Riley's like, hey, I'm going to come out. Like, I'm going to get in the car. I'm going to drive. You don't have to deal with this. Like, you shouldn't be here alone. And every time that Harper tries to give her the address, the phone cuts out. And eventually, she texts Riley, and Riley responds in a very aggressive, not Riley manner, like clearly in what one of the men who have been kind of taunting her throughout this ordeal would say. So then this leads to a series of very unsettling interactions, which again are an amazing use of the light. Like, she goes outside and she sees the police officer just kind of standing in her yard without saying anything. She's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you here? Please leave. And the lights start to flicker, and they go out, and they come back on, and no one's there. And then I think the lights go off and on again, and all the apples like start falling from this tree in the front of her house. And then we see one of the men that had been in this town. I think he's the one with the frosted tips. There are a few different characters in the saga. All of them are bad. And he is running towards the house. And so she runs inside, closes the door. This person hits the door, and then so some more unsettling things happen. And eventually the naked man is outside the house again. And he is becoming more and more like this unsettling image that we have in the church. It's this image of a man's face with like leaves around him. So now the naked man is looking more and more like that. He has some leaves around his face. He has thorns coming out of him. It looks very, very off. So Harper's in the house, and the naked man is like trying to get in. He's like slamming on the door, and then he reaches through the mail slot to like try to grab her, and he like holds his hand out like this. And Harper grabs his hand, which I was like, that's a terrible decision. And the naked man grabs her wrist and is like holding on tight. And so she, can't break his grip. She has a knife that she had earlier because there were so much unsettling things happening. And she stabs the naked man like through his wrist. And so that is very painful. And the naked man like pulls his arm out of the mail slot with the knife like caught there. So the knife basically keeps cutting his arm all the way down, like through his hand. Basically splits his arm. So that does not seem good. Then we have a series of visitors. We get the creepy masked, like childlike man who, basically shows up and is like, okay, let's play hide and seek. And each of these new entities has like a split arm like the naked man had. And so the hide and seek person comes in there and she like threatens to stab him. He's like, you can't do that. You're not gonna be able to do that. And so she eventually, runs, closes the door, and he very creepy is like, oh good, you're ready to hide. And he starts counting to 10. But after she counts to 10 as well, he's no longer there. And a new man, I think the frosted tips man, comes in and he, runs after her. She like runs into another room, closes and locks the door. And then the priest appears, admonishes her for like be like tempting him so. And like she has done nothing at all for this, but he's like accusing her of like tempting him, and he like essentially analogizes to, what is it, the Odyssey, when the sirens were calling on the rocks to like draw sailors in. He like analogizes her to that, and like her siren song is like pulling him in, and he can't control himself. So the priest eventually kind of like forces her up into the vanity in this bathroom and is like appears to be about to assault her, to rape her, and she stabs him with the knife that she's had. So he falls over. It seems like maybe like finally the pursuers are going to stop, because now one is apparently dead. But eventually she leaves and gets into her car and starts driving away. So she drives away. Seems like she's about to leave, but as she's like speeding away, who do we have? But we have Jeffrey in the middle of the road. She slams on the brakes, but she can't stop quick enough. She hits him, and so she stops to like make sure he's okay. And when she stops to see him, he also has like that messed up cut arm. And so he gets in her car. Like after she gets out, he gets in her car. She's like is kind of paralyzed in fear. She doesn't know what to do. And he drives away. And then we see the car come back around and come towards her. And she runs, as you would if a car was coming after you, and she runs back to the house, being pursued by this car, avoids getting hit by the car. The car slams into like one of the light posts that's right in front of the house. And so now she is back in the area and she collapses under the apple tree. And then we see the naked man like start to come towards her, but he is very, very messed up. Like his ankle's all messed up. He's like, it's broken in a weird way, so he can't really walk. So he's like kind of hobbling on his ankle. And he also starts to get a belly. And then he yells and starts to birth something from a new organ that he has. He starts to birth something from his vagina, and out births a fully grown man. And this is, I believe, the hide and seek man. And this starts a cycle where new horrors are birthed from the previous men. And so we go through the hide and seek man, who then births, I think, the frosted tip man, and then that person births Jeffrey, and then Jeffrey births James, Harper's ex-husband, which then it kind of started to make sense. Like this was the first abuser. This is the person that kind of started this cycle in her. And the injuries on these men that have happened do make sense as well, because these injuries are essentially what happened to James. Like his arm was split open from when he fell and he hit the fence, and his ankles were all messed up when he fell. They were both broken. So now, the injuries make sense. They have birthed back into James, and James kind of like gets up, and so he hobbles over to her and he starts to blame her for his injuries. And she just basically, I think she's kind of done with him at this point. Like she's done with everything. And she says, what do you want from me? And he says, your love. And she kind of looks at him and goes, yeah. And then that's it. That's the end of the movie. I think she has at this point finally kind of like worked through the various traumas that she's experienced here. Like, she's essentially conquered them, because she has gotten rid of, she survived the main assault, and then each of those, I don't know, tormentors birthed a new one, who eventually birthed back to the original tormentor, the original abuser, James. And so at this point, I think she is like done with it. Like he's trying to blame her again, and she's like, no, like that's it. I'm done with you. But that's the movie. There is a scene that happens after the credits start. It's morning. It's again beautiful. The lighting is beautiful. A car pulls up to this house, and you don't really know who it is, but you can see the carnage from the night before. So Harper's car is crashed into that lamppost. There's blood in various places. I mean, there's blood in the entryway from the hand that was cut. There's blood in a couple other places. So this car pulls up, and out of that car, you see Riley. Riley has finally made it. It's the morning the next day. She finally figured out where Harper was, and so she's made it. She looks up and sees Harper in the garden. Harper looks and sees her, and you see that Riley is pregnant. And Harper looks up and smiles at her. And that's the end. That's the end of the movie. I don't really know how to take that ending. It does seem like a happy ending. It does seem like Harper has overcome the traumas that she has experienced. But again, like I said, it didn't. That whole last section was a little bit too weird, a little bit too kind of over the top for me. But again, look, this is an interesting film. There's a lot to unpack in it. Maybe I have to see it again to get more from it, to unpack more. But that is Men. It's coming to theaters on May 20th, 2022. Like I said, it's a beautiful film. It is a masterful work of cinema. I just didn't love kind of the last third of the story and the ending. It's a little bit too strange for me, which is weird because I like a lot of strange movies. But in any event, that's Men. If you want to check it out, I definitely think it'll give you something to talk about. It'll give you something to kind of think about. And thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.